Welcome to Cindy's Certified Recipes. You know, there's nothing like a rich and succulent beef stew, and this Guinness beef stew version is a definite family fave. So let's get to chopping and get this stew a-simmering. You know, the best thing about making beef stew is everything's in big chunks. And so unlike making soup, it's easy to chop up all the ingredients. And I like to get these sections here that you'll see in the chuck roast and just eliminate some of the fat. You don't want to get rid of all the fat. And just cut it into cubes. All right, we have that all chopped up, and we're gonna put it in our bowl here so I can put some salt and pepper on there. Rinse off my hands. And we're gonna put just some sprinkles of salt and some black pepper. And just turn those over, get them all coated with the salt and pepper. And we're gonna set that aside and start chopping our veggies. On to the veggies now. I got a really nice big onion. If I couldn't find a big onion like this, I would have used 2 medium-sized ones. And here you just want a really rough chop. So we're just gonna cut him in half, like that. And you're just gonna make big chunks. Super easy. Same with your other veggies, you just want nice big chunks. And you know, when I went to get the garlic, I only called for like 3 or 4 cloves of garlic in this recipe, and the store wasn't cooperating. They had this garlic with these tiny little cloves. And so it looks like a lot, but it's about equal to what I normally use. And instead of trying to chop those tiny little cloves, I'm gonna use my little chopper here. My mom had one of these when I was a kid, but it was glass, and this is plastic. And this is actually the first time I'm using it for you guys. So let's see what it does. I would say that's better than chopping it by hand. So now we're done with those veggies. We're going to move on to our potatoes. And a lot of people like to leave the skin on. I particularly don't like to leave the skin on. So I'm just going to cut that skin off. Like that. And these are a little bigger than I wanted, so you want it chunky, so I'm going to cut that one in about thirds, and that's about the size potato you're going to want. And so we'll put that here in some water until I'm ready to use the potatoes. That'll keep them from turning black, and I'm just going to start cutting up the rest of these potatoes. Last one. And now we're gonna go take all these veggies and take them over to the stove along with the meat and get our stew going. To get our Guinness beef stew going here, I've got my pan heated up, and this is about 4 to 5 strips of bacon. And what we're gonna do with that is we're going to cook that up and render that fat out until the bacon's nice and crispy and we have a decent amount of fat in the pan. Now my bacon is kind of lean and not a lot of fat, which is how I normally buy my bacon. So if I have to add a little oil, I'll add just a little bit of olive oil to that. Our bacon has rendered down. When you do this, you want to cook it nice and slow to render that fat out. And so what we're going to do is try to leave as much fat as possible in the pan and transfer that cooked bacon to my Dutch oven. Just a few more pieces. That's good. And now we have some nice grease and browning going on in there. I'm now going to turn up the heat quite a bit, and we're going to start searing our beef cubes. You don't want to overcrowd the beef cubes. You can always work in batches. That's what we're looking for right there, nice and brown. Once those pieces have browned on both sides, I'm just going to transfer those as they brown up to my Dutch oven. And then after this one, I will work on the next batch of meat. There's batch number 1, and now we'll get with batch number 2. Our meat is out of the pan, and we still have all that nice brown goodness going on. We're going to put in our rough chopped onion. And we're going to stir that around until it gets brown and kind of translucent. You can see that our onions are getting beautifully brown and almost to that translucent stage that I like. And so we're going to add in that garlic that I used my nifty chopper on. You don't want to overcook garlic in this saute stage, or it'll get bitter. So we're only going to cook that 1 or 2 minutes. That's looking very nice, and you see all that brown goodness in the bottom there? Well, now we're going to add in our Guinness beer and deglaze this pan and scrape up all those brown bits. That's looking awesome. So we're going to move this pan and put my Dutch oven over here, and then we're going to pour this into there. So let's move that out of the way. Get all that good stuff in there. Now that we have all these flavors here combined, we're going to add in those rough chopped celery and carrots that we did earlier. And I'm going to add in my 1/4 cup of tomato paste. And this is a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. Good old bay leaf from my mom's tree. And this time was a little different, so about a bunch like this. I said just a few sprigs, but that's a few sprigs. And then we're gonna add our potatoes. And then we wanna add in the beef broth, and you just wanna barely cover that. That looks about right. And just a pinch of sugar to offset that beer. Give it all a good stir. And as this is simmering over the next couple hours, you'll be looking in on it and stirring it a few times. That's good for this first stir. And now I'm gonna raise that heat and bring it up to a boil. And then I'll lower it to a simmer and put the lid on, and my pot will do its magic. I've brought our stew up to a boil and then brought it back down to temperature to the simmering stage, and this is what you're looking for. Just a few bubbles here and there, and now it's time to put on the lid, and it's going to simmer for 2 hours, and I'll check it from time to time in between there. It's been 2 hours and our stew smells sensational. Let's take off the lid and give it a check. Look at that. That meat is so tender. And what you can do at this point is add a roux if you want to thicken that up. But what I'm going to do is turn the heat up and reduce it down. And chuck roast has a lot of collagen in it, and so that will help to thicken the sauce. And so let's turn up that heat and start it reducing. So you can see I've reduced this down. It was up to the line in this pot here, so that's well over 1 inch, and you can see how much thicker that sauce is, and it just looks amazing. And so we're gonna plate this up with my mashed potatoes, and you'll see how rich and thick this stew is. Okay, you guys, we're back with our finished stew, and I can hardly wait to dig into this because it's so good. I whipped up a batch of my creamy mashed potatoes that I did a video on previously, and we'll leave a link to at the end of this video. And so we're gonna ladle in some of this gorgeous stew. And I'm gonna test it. Not that I need to, but I can hardly wait. And that beef is just falling apart. Get some mashed potatoes. It's so good. You guys have to try this. And thank you for joining me on this episode of Cindy Certified Recipes. Rich, beefy, and so satisfying. It's comfort food at its best. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to not miss a thing. And as always, if it's time tested, top-notch ingredients, and the talk of the table, it's Cindy Certified.